Hello and welcome. My name is Melinda Haring, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. We're so delighted to have you here for a fantastic event. You're really in for a treat today. We are going to examine the rebirth of Ukrainian film, politics, personalities, and possibilities. Thank you so much for joining us in Washington and Kiev. Since 2014, Ukraine has built an impressive cultural infrastructure to strengthen its national identity and reimagine Ukrainian culture. Film has become one of the most important avenues through which Ukrainians have sought to reshape their nation's culture and create a distinctive Ukrainian cinema. Before 2014, the Euromaidan, Ukrainians mostly watched Russian films and Russian TV. But the Euromaidan and the ensuing war changed all of that and sparked a renaissance in Ukrainian film. And I'm really excited to hear about that renaissance today. We're joined by a number of producers and people who are film buffs. So again, I'm really excited about this event. Ukraine's new national cinema is known for its excellent documentary films, its patriotic action films, and thoughtful art house pictures. Recent films like The Atlantis and The Earth is Blue as an Orange have been nominated for awards at film festivals around the world, including Sundance, Vancouver, Berlin, and Venice. The Ukrainian film scene is exploding before our eyes, drawing on centuries of history and years of struggle to create a national cinematic culture that is uniquely its own. And now I'm delighted to turn things over to our moderator, Vladislav Davidzon, a non-resident fellow at the Eurasia Center and the longtime editor of the Odessa Review, a great cultural critic who will introduce our panelists and guide the conversation today. Now, this is an extra special panel because Vladislav's wife, Regina, is a Ukrainian filmmaker, and she's one of our panelists. Vlad, don't worry, Vlad has promised to ask her even tougher questions. Thank you for joining us. Vlad, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Melinda. What a great moment this is, and what a great joy to have all these wonderful speakers to discuss the rebirth of contemporary Ukrainian cinema. And we are saying rebirth. It's not a birth of Ukrainian cinema, because modern film, not just Ukrainian film, but modern film, was born on the territory of the country that is now Ukraine in the early 20th century, with some of the most interesting and important productions and experiments in the history of film, taught in every film department the world over, were made in either Kiev or Kharkiv or Lviv, or especially our beloved Odessa in the beginning of the 20th century. So this isn't a historical lecture, so we're not going to speak about Davidzon and all the remarkable Ukrainian contributions to the history of film, but we're going to talk about the future of Ukrainian film. So I'm joined by four very special speakers. First, we're going to have Mr. Adrian Karatnycky, my colleague at the Atlantic Council, senior fellow, whose accomplishments are longer than we can list, a former head of the Freedom House, and also someone who built a very important institution called the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter. After that, we are going to have comments from Mr. Vladimir Yatsenko, who is the Ukrainian representative to Eurimages. It's a very important European-wide institution for the creation of new film. He's also he's a double threat because he's one of Ukraine's most important, most accomplished film producers, who I think 60% of the most interesting films of the last 5 years were his productions. After that, we're going to have Mrs. Davidzon, Regina Maryanovska-Davidzon, who is used to be the managing editor of the Odessa Review. She's also a producer. She's the partner in Real Pictures, which is a Ukrainian film production company, which is about 2 years old. And last and not least, we have someone I have to thank for joining us at the last moment because technical issues. Miss Alexandra, one second, Yukobenko of the Ukrainian Cultural Fund. So she will speak about contemporary co-production issues when the time comes. So without too much ado, Mr. Karatnycky, could I just have some very, very broad sweeping general introductory remarks about the state of contemporary Ukrainian film production, about the challenges of a young country, a multicultural country trying to make film in contemporary Europe? Sir.
Well, let me start from the bias that I think we all share, and that is that we are interested and hope that Ukraine can produce great art. And while there are all sorts of reasons to instrumentalize art as a bridge to the West, as a voice of Ukrainian aspirations and its liberal values and its creativity, the real test of all these efforts is to create lasting art that people will turn to for the decades and centuries, we hope, beyond our years, onto the ages of ages. So rather than the idea of politics, possibilities, etc., I would say it's art, adversity, and aspirations that are the real subtext of this. And I think how one speaks to power, how one speaks to funders of film is one thing, but the underlying impulse, I think, of all the wonderfully creative people in Ukraine is to produce something of lasting value. And I think that one of the things we can say is that Ukraine, once again, Ukraine cinema is beginning to find its voice. At the moment, its voice is, I would say, not the full panoply, not the full orchestra. It's a beautiful maybe string quartet, because I think the genres in which Ukraine is showing excellence are primarily in the areas of the documentary, of the kind of sort of Black comedies and films that deal with grinding poverty, war, neglect, etc. That is an extremely important array of issues to be addressed, and we see this in the films of the many new exemplars who are emerging onto the public stage. And I think we can go through a list of some of these films if it's within my purview. So Natalia Vorozhbit's new film Bad Roads, the films that have already been mentioned, the films of Roman Bondarchuk, including some who made the leap from documentary into fiction films, which is one of the great aspirations, I think, of every documentary filmmaker, to go into fiction films, but then ideally into feature fiction films down the road. Obviously, the films are the creative explosion has occurred in part because the public is finding its voice. It's the cinematic community is connecting to its counterparts in other countries and has more access to the what I would say ocularacy rather than visual literacy, visual literacy, cinematic literacy, as a result of the access to film, that in the absence of a cinematheque in Ukraine, the creative possibilities that are emerging. So I think that all of these things are at work, but I think that there are a range of issues where Ukraine has not yet fully found its voice. It's partly found its voice, but the talent pool is there, the skill set is there, and I think that the issues of the wartime experience, the coming to terms with the Holocaust. There have been a couple films that have addressed this, but not to the degree. The Holodomor, where I think something larger is. Ukraine has not had its own lives of others, which is a sort of, I would say, a sophisticated attempt to explore the surveillance state and the totalitarian state that pre-existed. So I think there are many places, many arenas of future possibility, and this more narrow, realistic, neo-realistic, gritty filmmaking has won a lot of plaudits. It's shown I would say, the cinematic skills and the storytelling skills of a new generation of filmmakers, and I think it holds a lot of promise, which is the third P in our title.
Adrian, tell me, What do you make of the importance of the creation of a national cinema vis-a-vis state creation or strengthening state institutions? I mean, it's an instrumental way of looking at also, you know, you don't have a nation without culture and vice versa.
Well, what Ukraine lacks is an adequate group of capital formation for the film industry is a serious challenge, and therefore it's extremely important that the state provides some subsidy. And it's to the state's credit that it has been able to support a number of films of quality rather than hack films where there is a huge lobby for I would say special interest or entrenched interest. There seems to be, obviously there are different types of films that are being subsidized. Not all of them are of the highest artistic quality, and the state can often make mistakes in those kinds of things. But by and large, the performance has been very good. And ironically, the first increase in subsidy for Ukrainian filmmaking came under the much hated, Viktor Yanukovych, who increased substantially the state allocation for film productions. But happily, as those resources were coming, the Maidan revolution happened, and I think some of the custodians of this decision making, found a proper place. The other advantage that Ukraine, and I think that to promote this national cinema, Ukraine has the advantage of low cost, a high skilled, low cost workforce that is willing to, in a sense, to sacrifice for its art. The real question now is, how do you find the resources to adequately promote the output that is being produced? And I think that's the biggest challenge. The branding of, I know other people will be discussing the various cinematic waves and how countries came onto the global filmmaking map. Obviously, there's the festival circuit and so on. All that requires resources beyond simply funding productions. So I think Ukrainians know what needs to be done, which is the most important thing. I think they're beginning to collaborate, even if because of productions and filming that's being done here. Even small things like Carly B's new video, which is produced by a Ukrainian director who had also worked with Miley Cyrus. Even those kinds of small things connect people to resources, to networks, and potentially open the door to broader collaborations. One last thing is that the Ukrainian state was a partner in the creation of the film on the one film on the Holodomor by Agnieszka Holland and Mr. Jones, which I think received reasonably strong plaudits and attained a fairly strong audience in several countries, in particular in France. And I think that those kinds of collaborations hold a great deal of promise. But the big thing is one or two breakthrough directors who make the transition from simply producing in the Ukrainian market to potentially producing films to a broader community, earning plaudits, and then becoming themselves the voice and the promoter of their cinema. That, I think, is the strongest way through the development of the auteurs who produce this work and build an audience. And I think we've got these young auteurs that are beginning to interconnect and make a presence in Europe and to a lesser extent in North America.
Thank you, Adrian. That's very comprehensive. Okay, so I'd like to move on to Ms. Yakubenko. Can I have her unmute herself? Please, Alexandra, would you just start with explaining to non-Ukrainians what your institution does, what its funding is like, and what its relationship to the government is?
Yes, so as Melinda already said at the beginning, since Revolution of Dignity in 2013-2014, Ukraine experienced a cultural revival, and not only in audiovisual sector, in movie sector, but also all across the cultural and creative sectors. And on this note, several new institutions were created, among them Ukrainian Culture Foundation, Ukrainian Book Institute, Ukrainian Institute. And Ukrainian Culture Foundation is created under the Ministry of Culture Information Policy. And it was created in 2017 by the law of Ukraine on Ukrainian Culture Foundation and became the first state institution that distributed budgetary funds in the form of grants on the basis of open applications and on expert selection to support initiatives in the sphere of culture and creative industries. So this is on the same scale as, for example, Canada's Arts Council or a British or US Endowment of Arts, yes, institutions. So UCF works with all sectors of arts and culture. There are 8 of them. We establish its visual arts, performing arts, audiovisual arts, movies, etc., literature and publishing, design and fashion, cultural and creative industries that include festivals and all the cross-sectoral projects, and cultural heritage. And also we include, since 2020, cultural domestic tourism. So to give you a scope, so we only active for 3 years and we had 3 grant calls. So each year we have an open call for projects. And to give you the scope of our operations for this 3 years, in 2018, we supported 293 projects for the total of around 4.6 million euros. In 2019, we supported 432 projects for around 16.6 million euros. And in 2020, due to COVID and budget cuts, we supported regular 294 projects, and additionally we gave out institutional crisis support for cultural and creative organizations to 853 organizations, and for the total amount, including regular projects, around 30 million euros, but these numbers may be revised as the finalization of audit is still in action. So we give grants on the basis we have grant programs, and audiovisual sector is the biggest one that we support, and traditionally and historically is the most prepared for such types of applications and has the most of the demand around the sectors. Yes, so this is the initial how we operate, and I can elaborate more detail on our support of audiovisual sector after you, Vladislav.
Great, that's great. Follow-up question, very briefly. What are the criteria for selecting particular films? How do you know that one film project is good as opposed to another?
Okay, so yes, so here I should break down our audiovisual support. So in 2020, we supported audiovisual sector like in total. So we had just a bunch of projects. And in 2019, we moved to program-based. And in 2019, we had, we were asked by ministry to support, we created the program that supported all stages of movie development. So we had grant call for pre-production projects, script development, for production stage, for post-production stage, and for the promotion. And this was our biggest program in 2019. And it was in total about totaled for about maybe third of the budget or even more. The half of the budget was for this one program. And we supported creation of 55 scripts, 30 pre-productions, and 40 movie productions and 4 animations. So for each program, we have a criteria that is stated in our applications, and the projects are selected by and evaluated by experts board that is selected from the peers. So it's a peer selection basically, and it goes through our electronic application system, electronic evaluation system, and goes into several stages as very common in Europe. So technical selection, and then expert evaluation, and then decision, and signing the contract and giving the grant. So as Adrian stated, several names. I would like to name actually several the most prominent results of our work, and that we are very proud of actually of our 2019 year, because we support a lot of projects that now are coming into fruition. For example, Bad Roads. It was one of the projects that Ukrainian Culture Foundation supported in 2019, and now we are very happy that it came to such a fruition. And for example, in 2018, we supported such movies as Tanger and Ukraine on Fire, Ukraina в огні, is a documentary on Revolution of Dignity, and you can watch it on Netflix, actually. And for our youngest audience, we supported such amazing cartoon series, Travel Book Ukraine. And you can find it on the YouTube channel. And I believe it has English subtitles, or even several languages subtitles, Travel Book Ukraine. So in 2019, one of the biggest projects, one of the most prominent projects we supported was a promotional Oscar campaign for 2019 Donbass movie that is also got for director Serhiy Loznitsa Uncertain Regards for Best Direction at 71st Cannes Festival. So also we supported our prominent movie festivals as Odessa Festival, our animation festivals all across the board.
I love the Odessa Film Festival, and you should always support them. Let me ask our next panelist, who is from Odessa, as a transition, Mrs. Maryanovska-Davidzon. Let me ask you, what has Ukraine accomplished in the last few years, film-wise? What are the successes?
As Adrian already mentioned, over the last few years, Ukraine has become a mainstay of the international film scene. Ukraine now competes in top-tier international film festivals. For example, Atlantis by Valentin Vasinovich, Homeward by Nariman Aliyev, both of which were produced by my colleague, Mr. Yatsenko, and you should ask him about them when it's his turn to speak. There was also The Earth is Blue as an Orange, which has a tremendous success in the film festivals and was nominated to Oscar to documentary Oscars, but didn't get to shortlist. So all these films have done well on the international stage, and it's an organic process which resembles the Romanian new wave cinema of about a decade ago. Many new young filmmakers appearing, some of them is very talented and polished, any others need to develop more. There are many co-productions taking place all the time, especially with our neighbors. For example, with Poles or Lithuanians, as Frost, the film which was presented in Cannes a few years ago, and the same countries produced Stasis, the film which was selected by the Venice Film Festival 2 years ago. I'm going to put all this film into chat for our audience if they are interested.
Sorry, let me unmute myself. Follow up to Mrs. Davidson. How does it work being a Ukrainian producer? Is it very much different from being, let's say, an American producer or a Greek producer?
No, I don't think it's really different from being a Greek producer, but it's different from being an American producer, that's for sure. Because in America, films are made in Hollywood or by independent producers without any government support. Ukraine doesn't have yet a developed system for private investment for film. Almost all the films that have been made in the last 10 years were made by government support. That is the basic nature for producing in Ukraine. So in this, we very much like France, French system of top-down decision making, but there are some difference, of course. Ukrainian producer finds projects that they like and develops them. We prepare the application documents and legal forms for the competition, which is held by the Ukrainian Film State Agency. A director needs to have a producer to apply for state agency funding. And the production company is legally responsible for finishing the project and for the taxpayers' money. We also develop the careers of the directors that we work with. Along with my partner in Real Pictures, Oleksiy Gladushevsky, we tend to work with emerging and younger directors. We walk the whole path with them, from development the project to finishing it. That includes strategy for film festivals and picking out which pitching session is good for them. So we develop their careers also.
As well as projects, you highlight careers. So Mr. Yatsenko, you're up next. You're also a producer, like Mrs. Davidson, but let's start with your official designation and your official duties as representative to Eurimages. And before you tell us what it is that the representative to Eurimages does, unlike our northern neighbors, the Canadians, Americans are not associate members of that organization. Many of our American friends won't actually know what it does. So let's start with what is Eurimages and what does it do?
Hi everyone. So yeah, Eurimages, it's a very nice organization which usually step in on the last stage of the project when you have at least 50% of the money already in place with different co-producers, because it only works with the co-production. So you can't apply if you just produce it in your own country. You have to have several co-producers. And it's quite competitive, but it's really, really great in the way that usually they support the author voice, quite unique voice in Europe. And it's not huge amount of money. Now they changed the rules a bit, and it's you can get up to 150K euros as a grant. You don't have to pay it back, or you can get up to actually 500 euros as a loan. But the problem is that Ukrainian industry is quite rookie, so we just only develop and we only learning the rules, how to work with Eurimages, how to work with the different other systems to actually raising the money. So for us, it's quite complicated. And basically, I should say that, of course, it's I would like to agree with Regina, because I can't imagine the Ukrainian producers who work only with the private money, because we don't have market for it. I mean, the cost of admission is very low. It's around €3, and it's only 500 screens in the whole country. Maybe after the COVID situation, we have less. So it's not really possible to get your money back if you invest in pure Ukrainian movie. So which may be a good side, because it forces us to take part in any kind of co-production with mostly with European countries. And our authorities only now realize that it's much cheaper to put some money in creation of the films, which actually creations the senses and creations the values of the nation, to compare to put some money in the weapons, because it's always cheaper. So as a new industry, we have a lot of problems right now. Like, for example, because we don't have the strong school of the screenwriters, most of the projects is written by directors. So this is why we have so much art house project, because most of the it's mostly directors who write the stories which bother them, and then you can decide, do you like to step in it or not. And of course, because of the war with Russia, because of a lot of social problems, we just gold mine for documentary films for the whole continent, I believe. And we very poor on the genre movies, because we only start to work with it, to play with it. Usually it's very stupid comedies, Ukrainian comedies, but some of them it's a really great exception. I can highly recommend the film which called My Sota Silent by Antonio Lukic. It's young Ukrainian directors. I think it's quite unique from the one side, but from the other side, quite universal sense of the humor. But mostly we don't have that much developing genres. Like, we don't have thrillers, we don't have a lot of actions and so on. So it's not that much choice for the moment. But of course, we only starting, so we're trying to do our best.
Mr. Yatsenko, but Ukraine does make these patriotic kind of nationalist films, and people do like war films, right? So Ukraine makes these comedies, which can sometimes propel you to a presidency, makes art house films, a lot of them, and some of them are really good, documentaries about the war, and also these kind of nationalist films, which are very popular, are actually often the ones that do make money, right?
Yeah, but you mean national films, it's quite popular, but I mean, it's not a lot of different choice. So people just take it because, I mean, they don't have any other things. But of course, it can't compete with the Hollywood movies, with the Hollywood comedies and so on. So it's quite complicated. And of course, the authorities is not that much happy that most of the films is auto-driven films or documentary films, because they would like to get any kind of like successful case in terms of the like wider audience. So it's quite a big problem right now, but of course we are trying to do our best. And it's another one problem, because it's Alexandra is mentioned the Ukrainian Cultural Fund, which was a huge help in 2019. But for example, now they don't have a special program for developing or for movie production. And it's, of course, it's then it drives us to the situation that we have only one window, which is Ukrainian State Film Agency, and that's it. I mean, if you lose the pitching session, which is usually one per year, you lose 1 year. And of course, it's very complicated to be in a profession to keep rolling if you can't feed every year with successful projects. So it's also very, very complicated things also.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm going to circle back around to Adrian, but maybe this is a question for everybody. But let's get Adrian, who's a man of politics as well as being a very erudite fellow, a very worldly and very cultured fellow. This is a government that Ukraine has of filmmakers. This is a government of film producers. Probably it's never happened before that I can think of, where the head of the intelligence agency is a producer and a lawyer, right? Whatever country in the world in the middle of a war makes the head of the intelligence services the head spook in the country, a film lawyer or film producer.
Unfortunately, he's not a screenwriter because we want that film in about 5 years.
Yeah, Adrian, go ahead.
No, I mean, my point is, unfortunately, we've got like people who were, I mean, yes, there were a few people who were in this production company, but the people around the president were basically, it's sort of, I don't think they can be the custodians of a cultural shift, because it's sort of like the people who did Benny Hill taking over, the British film industry. I'm not sure that that is the sensibility that augments. I'm not speaking about any particular producer, entertainment lawyer, or anyone else in the president's entourage. Of course, we respect them, and some of them may have interesting aesthetic sensibilities, but I don't think you're going to get much out of this fortuitous happenstance. And I hope that they are maybe in the direction, if Ukraine finds the resources for genre movies and so on, these guys will have a sensitivity to these issues and a feel for the market. But I think what we're talking about, at least what I'm talking about, is how does a cinema break through in terms of having sort of lasting value and appealing across cultures and civilizations by dealing with transcendent issues. And I'm not sure that this crew is particularly good for that, though they may be good for doing a comedy about the surveillance of ordinary citizens over the years of their tenure in power.
Ouch. Okay, Miss Alexandra, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, you work with this government, and they have been sensitive, as far as I know, in my conversations with experts and people in the Ukrainian film industry, to the requirements of the film industry and to the desires of people in film. Do you think government by film producers is a good thing?
Well, what I can speak, Vladimir said that we don't have anymore the program for the development, and it was a decision of our government that all the stages, pre-development, development, post-development, will be moved to Film State Agency as a try to focus the activities of each particular foundation so that they don't cross-pollinate. And so we were left only with audiovisual sector that includes everything except for the movie sector itself, like the feature films, the documentaries, the animation. So TV screens, YouTube channels, everything is possible. Educational programs for film industry, easy. Anything else? For me, the support, I think for Ukraine, the hybrid system is best, because we are not yet prepared for the fully commercial and only business supported film industry, because we can't leap this gap of the development of the movie industry. Yes, we can't reach the US status just over 1 year, and not to go through all the stages, because our financial system, legal system also lacks a lot in this sphere, just to engage, to encourage the co-productions, the business money involvement, investments into the cinema. So for now, state support is very essential, and the good working state support is very essential. So as we see now, state agency a little bit limps maybe in this regard, and we as a foundation do anything we have capability, so, and give permission, yes, from the ministry to support. So from us, it is essential to support the sector from the point of view of the development of professionalization of the sector of the educational programs, for example, of supporting film festivals, as we do still. We have a program for prominent events, so-called, that supports festivals, big festivals, local festivals. It's also very important for such organizations as Dovzhenko Center. We have a great movie archive, the Dovzhenko Center, that also a museum, a very prominent organization that developed very rapidly with new management, and really discovers and reimagines the Ukrainian cinema history and legacy, and creates also new amazing projects. And it's also very important to support such, to create this attractions from abroad, not only to like allocations, but also as something that can be regarded as legacy and yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I once ran a profile of Mr. Ivan Kozlenko, who's the director of that institution, which Alexander is mentioning, the Dovzhenko Center. That is a fantastic organization. That is a real success story for contemporary Ukrainian culture. You can get your Google out. You can look up Mr. Ivan Kozlenko in the Odessa Review. It's a great profile of a reformer, also from Odessa.
Vlad, can I make a point just to add a little bit of balance to what I had said earlier, which is to say that to focus on not so much the entourage of the president and his entertainment team and their experience, but the Minister of Culture, who had substantial experience engaged in a film studio in Odessa, who had run a television station. He is I would say, a pretty worldly guy. He has, I think, strong both nation building and aesthetic sensibilities. And I think that at the moment, the custody of the Ministry of Culture is in very good hands. I don't know how influential he is in fighting for resources, but I think he is I would hope that the Ukrainians on the panel can confirm that he is a reasonable interlocutor and a strong interlocutor who knows what needs to be done, but may not always have the resources to do it.
Mr. Yatsenko, do you agree that Tkachenko is a good Minister of Culture, better than the last two or three?
Is it a question to me, right?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely not worse. At least we don't know why I'm telling that, because we don't know that much what he's planning to do, because it's not even a year when he takes this chair, and the initiatives sounds really great, but with the most of Ukrainian authorities initiatives sounds great. But if we talk about the real things, the real support, then we will see. Because what was really great, what I really should say was done really good, it's the institutional support which passed through the Ukrainian Cultural Fund to all the production companies, to the cinemas and so on during the COVID times. And it's really just helps us to survive. So it was some of the money which was special, delighted to these purposes. So some of the things is really, really great. Or for example, I don't know that much, but I believe the support of Ukrainian Book Institute is really good, and so on. So yeah, we'll see. And it's also a problem in Ukraine that, you know, the government is changing all the time. Nobody know what's going to be in a month. So it's very inconvenient, but this is the reality we live in.
Thank you. Last question to a panelist, to Ms. Regina Maryanovska-Davidzon, before we kick it over to the Q&A and everyone who is listening and gets a chance to chip in with their 2 cents. Mrs. Davidzon, what are the negative issues that you as a producer face? I mean, it's Ukraine, so sadly we're going to be more negative and positive, but you know, we are building a nation. You do have to be critical. So what are the negative things that you see as a producer in your day-to-day activity?
Yes, as Vladimir already said, the big problem is that we don't have any development or post-production support anymore. But I would like to add to this that also we don't have regional film fund, as in France, for example, Germany, every region has its own well-financed film funds. One can get money for film projects from one's own region. So, for example, as Île-de-France, that's region around the Paris, or Alpes-Maritimes, they have their own money, which obviously needs to be spent in that region in order to stimulate local job production. And clearly Kharkiv, Lviv, or Odessa do not have the same thing, because our country has other priorities. The another problem that it's really difficult to make money in this business when there are only 470 screens in the country. In France, for example, with a population of 67 million, there are 5,500 screens. Our neighbor Poland has about the same population as us, a few million less, but 3 times the number of screens. So selling tickets, it's difficult. But the new Ukrainian streaming platforms do offer us some help. I don't know how it will work in the future, we'll see. For example, TAC Films shows only Ukrainian films. I think people are really interested in watching a domestically made product.
Okay, great. So let's have about 15 minutes of questions and direct conversation with our audience watching at home. So we have a question from one Mr. Petro Pavlichenko. He asks the entire panel, but maybe we'll start with Adrian, because it's a political question again. Who should be funding Ukrainian cinemas at the state business? Should there be rules, limits on established business or absence of ties of oligarchs? Always a tough question in Ukraine. Russian connections, oligarchic connections, that sort of thing, or or is it too radical to even speak about transparency issues? Adrian?
Well, we're speaking about transparency issues more broadly in the media market. I don't see how transparency issues in the financing of film or the arts will escape that kind of scrutiny. I mean, the current controversy in Ukraine is over the banning of a series of entities that were supporting the work of several Russia-friendly, pro-Russian TV stations, for which there is evidence that the mechanisms for financing came from Russia, a country that is promoting war. So clearly, that kind of a filter will have to be present. Ukraine will need to cobble together and find markets. And I think that the way you find investors is if Ukraine has 1 or 2 breakthrough films that go beyond, that make back, earn back their investment in a substantial way. And the history of independent film is littered with thousands of examples of such low-budget success stories. 1 or 2 of them, and I think you will be able to attract a few adventurous, high net worth individuals domestically to support the film industry. I don't have an oligarch filter, especially if some businessman or oligarch is willing to fund something of real merit. I personally have no objection to seeing such funding. If there is an ulterior motive, like a film about a fictional oligarch, which is part of a battle between 2 economic rivals, then I think it raises all sorts of moral and ethical issues. Clearly, the Ukrainian cinema is in substantial need of capital infusions, and these should come from a state that is overwhelmed and with dealing with the problems of COVID, with the problems of occupation, with the problems of the subjects of the films that are seeking funding. And while and so it will have to inevitably be a blend. Clearly, I'm not an expert in the tax advantages or disadvantages of investing in film in Ukraine, and whether there is some incentivization. But I think that's something that obviously the industry would welcome. So again, I think it has to be, for a country like Ukraine, it has to be a blend of those. I think the state does not have the ability to dramatically increase its support for culture, unfortunately. Perhaps that will change if there's greater tax compliance on the part of the public and of oligarchs. But for the moment, I think you have to try to find the resources where they may be, including, I would say, these cross-border international productions. But the real breakthrough, Ukraine will have one or two breakthroughs, and I think it'll attract some attention from Western film producers, investors, and the like. And more importantly, if one or two of these nascent, creative artists, directors, and filmmakers begin to build a strong international reputation, they will bring with them, I think, some new resources, at the very least, for their work, and shine a light on the potential of their counterparts in Ukraine.
Thank you, Adrian. So we have another question from Ms. Helena Goshilo. It's a very smart question, actually. The impression of our presentations collectively leads one to conclude that Ukrainian film is about a decade behind Polish film. Polish film has, of course, experienced a stunning renaissance and international success. Much to that is the turnaround due to the PISF, which is, of course, the Polski Instytut Sztuki Filmowej. Do you see the Ukrainian film industry operating analogously to Poland, with USV operating along the same lines as the PISF? Does Ukraine intend to create series and films for Netflix, as well as engaging town placement or area placement for its films? I think Alexandra would be well positioned to take that one.
Well, institution, yes. So I know about this institution, and our director visited it in 2018 as part of this visit to get a navigation of how we should develop and how to get a hand of how to develop the ecosystem. So I think it is, I think producers can answer more on hands-on question about this. I can answer only on institution-based. I think for Ukraine, it is important to have a strong institutional network that covers audiovisual sector and cinema, museum, that agency that supports, and etc. Ukrainian Culture Foundation that supports other aspects of sector development. And as I said, and at the same time to aim at the strengthening investor support and engaging business money. So for me, answer is it is yes, it is similar. I see similarities because we have quite similar with Poland, the regional situation and regional problems and historically. So there are some similarities, but we don't have to copy. We will have to find our own development ecosystem of the culture and creative industries, because we can't copy any other country because it's fruitless. But for now, the institutional ecosystem is very important.
Okay, that's great. I have another question from my friend, a very good journalist by the name of Bennett Murray, who's reported from Ukraine. Bennett asks about Ukrainian comedies. He says that he's heard that of all the genres, comedy is the most difficult for filmmakers to translate from Russian to Ukrainian language due to linguisticity and the lack of translation for jokes semantically. Is there a truth to this? And how have comics successfully adapted this? I think Mr. Yatsenko will take that one, yeah?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just was too busy to write in the answers that I missed the question. Could you please repeat?
one journalist friend of mine asks if it's very difficult to translate comedy from Ukrainian, from Russian into Ukrainian. There are linguistic issues.
It's the most complicated task in the world, because I mean the irony is quite different, and in any countries, and we have a completely different, dreams, completely different social issues and so on. So it's quite complicated. But as I recommend earlier, for example, the My Soda Silent is really great comedy, which I think Ukraine could be proud of, and it's quite interesting approach. And I believe it's going to be more if we will start to make more transparent, more universal type of the films. It's going to be great, especially English speaking, because we only started. I can maybe only mention the film which did the Sergei Lavrenyuk, producer. He did it with Ivanna Sakhno. I don't remember the name of the movie. Maybe you will help me. And it was quite interesting collaboration between Hollywood production. Of course, it was a small one, but it was English speaking. And I think it's going to be more and more experiments like that.
Can I just a quick remark on the translation? As a viewer, just from pure viewer perspective, I don't know, it's hard, but our Ukrainian translation and dubbing is like on the top notch. And let's take, I don't know, some Marvel movies or the Deadpool. The localization is amazing. The humor that was translated, not directly, but finding this analogs from our culture, these jokes, inside jokes that only Ukrainians will understand from the web even, but they would finding these brilliant analogs that work perfectly with the movie and with our Ukrainian context. So I don't see any problems with translations and dubbing, because our Ukrainians are the better than Russians in dubbing for sure.
That is absolutely the case, and Ukraine is, over the last 5 years, has made tremendous progress in turning dubbing into a veritable art. It's not great for getting the entire population to learn foreign languages, so people know English and French worse, let alone German. But you watch Star Wars, and the voice actors do these funny voices, and there's intonations, and there's linguistic puns and stuff. It's a really artistic craft at the highest level, even if, again, my purist aesthete wife despises dubbing because she's a film person. That aside, I think we have time for just one more question. Mr. Ole Kotsuba, who is a very good professor of Ukrainian studies, asked us if the Ukrainian film industry has been successful financially, in part because of its capacity to sell product to Russian-speaking audiences. What is the current status of such productions? What impact did the war with Russia have on Ukrainian filmmakers' ability to produce such films and distribute them? And has a reorientation towards a more global and English-speaking audience begun? So I guess, well, Alexander spoke last, so yeah, Mr. Yatsenko.
Yeah, I'm gonna be quick. Just yes, some of the big studios still producing some films, which is also distributed on the Russia territory. But most of the producers, they don't do it. They don't sell any kind of cultural projects, because it's a little bit weird when you have the war and simultaneously you have the trade. I mean, so most of us, of course, don't do it. But you're right, in terms of the commercial success, it's gonna help a lot. But it was our choice, and we are completely okay with this. Thank you.
We do have one more minute. So I think our two producers who actually make films, unlike Adrian and Alexander and I, who analyze things and look at things and pontificate about them, you actually make things. Regina and Vladimir, before we leave, before we say thank you to you for your expertise and for your time and for your good cheer, can you just in 30 seconds each tell us about your most exciting projects? Regina first, and then Vladimir.
I have 3 projects right now that we are working with my partner on. 2 features. One is a black and white film will be directed by American writer and filmmaker Helga Landau, The Photographers. It's the story which take place in Odessa in August 1991. Another film is My Young Prince. It's a story about a 70-year-old teenager who has inner neurosis and clipping fear of outside world. It will be made by Armenian-Ukrainian filmmaker Khachatur Vasilyan. And the third one is a documentary by female director Olga Chernych. This doc film is set in Department of Pathology inside of Kiev Regional Hospital, and will now analyze the social issues and will ruminate on the nature of life and death, the topical theme today.
Okay, great, thank you. Vladimir, before we go, take us away, sir.
Very easy. I have two projects in post-production. One is the next project of Valentin Vassinovich, who did Atlantis. Now it's called Reflection, and we've been selected for Berlinale co-production market last year. And now we won the work in progress section in Les Arcs. So it's going to be really big, great movie. And I hope we will end up on the A-class festival, definitely, because the interest is so huge, and I'm really happy about it. And the second film is actually first debut feature film of the Irina Tselik, who did The Earth is Blue as an Orange. And it's a feature film now, and it's called Rock, Scissors, Grenade. And one of the main role playing the very well-known Ukrainian poet, Yurko Izdrik. And I'm really, really happy that we did it, because he is an amazing person. And it's going to be a really interesting movie about the 90s and grow up in the 90s, but from the perspective of the child. So it's not going to be harsh and dark and bad. It's going to be completely different, which I really, really love. Maybe a little bit sad. And two more projects which we have right now. The one is, it's called Luxembourg, and it's new comedy by Antonio Lukic, who did My Sota Silent, about two twins brothers who realize that their father is dying in Luxembourg, and now they have to deal with it. Should they visit him or not? And very touchy story, which called You as a Universe. It's debut feature film of Pavlo Ostrikov, very well-known Ukrainian director, who is, his short was like more or less everywhere in all of the festivals. And it's a love story which happened in the space, in the way kind of like Sleepless in Seattle, but in the space. So I'm very, very, very much eager to look on these films when it's going to be ready.
That sounds great, and we're really looking forward to all of those projects. I want to say thank you to everyone. First of all, to Melinda Haring for helping us mastermind this this gathering of creative spirits and artists and artisans and their supporters. I want to thank Adrian for his expertise. Regina, thank you everyone who took an hour out of their time to listen to the development of contemporary Ukrainian culture. It's an extremely important process, and long may it live. So have a nice day, everybody.